After climbing to the top of the corporate ladder, she finally made love a priority.
Whatever she was missing, he was able to fulfill it. They were attached at the hip. Really, the only time they separated was when both of them went to work.
But a fateful December night will tear them apart forever.
Jay, just bring up some action tape.
There was blood all around her, blood on the walls.
She has been dead for quite some time.
When the men closest to her point the finger at each other, who's telling the truth?
He's a stalker. I really don't trust him at all.
This guy is like real jealous, controlling.
He was blackmailing her and extorting her for money.
She gave him everything, money, bought a car for him, pays for everything.
Get out! Before I call the cops.
It got to the point where I just couldn't be there.
He was a very violent person, the definition of dangerous.
December 2019. With only days until Christmas, residents in West Palm Beach, Florida are preparing for the holiday season.
This particular area of Florida is surrounded by marinas, yachts, and it's right next door to Palm Beach County, which is home to a lot of American billionaires.
It's known as a very upscale, safe area.
But on the evening of December 16th, as most residents are fast asleep, the quiet tranquility is shattered after the clock strikes midnight.
The department received a 911 call from an individual they identified as Ronald Gamble.
West Palm PD, what's your emergency?
Come quick, my girlfriend needs help. Please.
He had come home from being away for the weekend and found a bloody scene.
He finds his girlfriend, 52-year-old Rochelle Demings, laying in a pool of her own blood.
Oh my God, Rochelle, she's not breathing.
West Palm Beach police were immediately dispatched to the scene.
Come on outside for me. Okay, you didn't touch her at all. Have you moved her at all? You checked her anything? Okay, is anybody else in the home?
I don't think so.
Okay.
When the officer looks inside the door, he is taken aback by what he sees.
Oh.
The officer can tell there's no use trying CPR.
It looks like Rochelle has been dead for quite some time.
Jay, just bring up some action tape.
At that point, the officer radios down to homicide detectives to start an investigation.
All right, we got the medics. They're going to come check on her, but it doesn't look good, bud.
The 52-year-old mother of two, Rochelle Demings, was as accomplished as they come.
She had 2 bachelor's degrees, 2 associate's degrees. She also went on to get her master's degree.
She was a bright light, a walking smile and inspiration to anyone that she crossed paths with.
She was a very accomplished federal employee with the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs.
She was the chief of HIMSS at the West Palm Beach VA. HIMSS is Health Information Management Service.
Her employees describe her as someone who was always willing to help, always willing to teach them how to elevate their career as well.
Even though she was a chief, she would be alongside of us working every day if we got behind. She was down in the trenches with us.
But despite the success she'd built, something was still missing.
Her kids were grown, and after 20 years of marriage, she divorced their father. So she was missing companionship, she was missing romance.
Although Rochelle was very well respected in her industry, she got lonely.
So Rochelle decided to take action.
She went online, and it didn't take long until she was matched with Ronald Gamble.
Ronald wasn't as esteemed or decorated as Rochelle. However, he did work different temp agency jobs.
On their first date, sparks flew.
He seemed to be a really nice guy, and he was very supportive of all of the things that Rochelle had going on in her life.
You know, you are really something else.
I was just glad I'm able to make you smile, you know?
He was very charming. He made Rochelle laugh. He was able to make Rochelle feel like that whatever piece she was missing, he was able to fulfill it.
And after that first date, their relationship moved fast.
Ronald was constantly at Rochelle's house. They were tied together at the hip.
He moved in with her pretty quickly.
After 3 years of dating, they actually upgraded their lifestyle and they moved into a beautiful, amazing new condo in West Palm Beach.
But after the couple had spent only a few weeks in their new home, detectives are there to begin a homicide investigation.
We were confronted with Miss Demings, who's laying on the floor right in the breezeway or the foyer area of this apartment. There's a large quantity of blood on the ground, and she's obviously deceased.
It was absolutely a terrible scene.
It's clear to police that whatever happened in that apartment, Rochelle died a violent death.
The only way that you could get around her was to jump over her. So it was a very difficult scene to work because all of the blood.
It was really hard for the police to find out the source of where her blood was coming from, but it did appear as though the blood was coming from her head.
And from the looks of it, Rochelle's been dead for a few days.
There was lots of blood. It was dark blood, which looked like it had been sitting there for a while. Some looked like it was dried because of the length of time that it had been there.
There was actually some pieces of mail that were in very close proximity to her body at the time.
They wonder if she was holding the letters when she was attacked and dropped them.
But aside from the gory scene in the entryway, nothing in the apartment seems amiss.
Nothing appeared to be stolen.
The door wasn't broken, so it really didn't seem like somebody entered that shouldn't be there.
Her boyfriend's the one that found her?
Yes, he's been very cooperative so far.
Okay.
Detectives are eager to speak with Ronald themselves to learn more.
They're very curious to see if he knew about who would be able to cause this kind of harm to Rochelle.
Or did he have something to do with it?
After years of prioritizing her successful career, 52-year-old Rochelle Demings had found love at long last.
She fell head over heels in love with a man named Ronald Gamble. The two had just moved into a place together in West Palm Beach.
They wanted to spend as much time as they could together.
But now the couple's new condo is a crime scene.
Rochelle was located on the floor of the condo with some type of head injury that produced a lot of blood.
As word spreads to Rochelle's friends, family, and coworkers, they're heartbroken.
So I get to work, and people were emotional and everything. They grab me, and they tell me that Rochelle is dead. My whole professional world had collapsed. Like, what the F you mean she dead? So, didn't make it through the day at all. Another person ended up taking me home.
Rochelle's boyfriend, Ronald Gamble, also seems shaken up.
Ronald was the one that called 911 after he returned to the condo and found Rochelle.
Detectives are very curious to see if he knew about who would be able to cause this kind of harm to Rochelle.
Or did he have something to do with it?
Detectives bring Ronald back to the station for an official statement.
He had no problem speaking to us at all. He's very talkative. He's very open about things.
How long have you two been together?
I would say 3 years now.
He explained that he and Miss Demings had been dating for a few years and that they had just moved to this apartment.
But Ronald says there's one person who had recently come between them, Rochelle's 27-year-old son, Dan.
They had a wonderful relationship up until the son came from Ohio.
What happened was, okay, I lived with her for a while, and then all of a sudden, her son comes out of nowhere. Her son is a stalker.
When detectives ask Ronald to elaborate, he starts at the beginning.
When Dan decided to move from Cleveland, Ohio to Florida, he had nowhere else to go. So Rochelle, being the mother that she is, she allowed Dan to come home to her home. But Ronald was very reluctant against that.
After Dan moved in, Ronald says the entire dynamic between him and Rochelle shifted.
He said they had started having disagreements and arguing.
He's an adult, Rochelle. He needs to grow up and get his own place.
You just don't understand. That is my only son.
We've never had any trouble before he came, never. He's always involved in our life. Like, he won't just get out of our lives.
And it became an issue that she gave him everything, money, bought a car for him, pays for his phone bill, pays for everything.
Ronald got fed up. He made the statement that if Dan wasn't going to pay bills, then Dan had to get out. Dan did not like that.
Do and get out. Hey, what's going on in here?
You're 27. She doesn't owe you. I keep telling him that. Every time he tries, I say, bro, get out. Your mom don't owe you, bro. Get from around us. You're grown.
Then Ronald says things took a turn for the worst.
He bust me in the head with a hot sauce bottle.
Get out before I call the cops.
And I called the police out. And I told them, hey man, the guy that assaulted me.
Ronald ended up pressing charges and Dan was arrested. He was charged with aggravated battery and taken to jail.
But Ronald claims Dan's volatile behavior continued.
A few weeks later, Ronald and Rochelle woke up to the sound of glass smashing. When they went to see what it was, or who it was Dan.
What the hell are you doing?
What are you doing?
He punched through their window, trying to get in.
I don't know why he did it, but he did it and cut his arm all up. I said, babe, you got to remove him from our lives. We can't live like this. You're a professional, I work. He doesn't want to do nothing with his life.
Get out before I call the cops.
Once again, Ronald had Dan arrested.
So it's been month after month, we've had the police over there on him within a year, about at least 20 or 30 times. I really don't trust him at all.
And Ronald says the apartment complex also became fed up with the drama.
Because of the issues that the son and he were having and the trouble that it was causing, they had asked them to leave.
They were evicted from their apartment.
Ronald felt like Dan was ruining what he had with Rochelle, so that led him to file a restraining order against Dan.
Within a month, the couple had found a new place to live. And with Dan out of the picture, Ronald says it felt like a new beginning.
They were starting new, and her son would not know where they lived.
But Ronald says he believes Dan found them once again.
He's obsessed with his mom. And I don't know, I've seen some other weird things I don't want to say. Makes me think, other things are going on too.
Say it. What are you going to say?
Nothing could prepare them for what came out of Ronald's mouth next.
He talks about some wild accusations.
That's nasty. No.
Detectives in West Palm Beach are investigating the murder of 52-year-old Rochelle Demings.
She was found in a pool of blood by her boyfriend, Ronald Gamble. It was clear she had been brutally attacked.
And now Ronald is raising suspicion about Rochelle's own son.
He claims that Dan was jealous of his relationship with Rochelle.
According to Ronald, Dan had been violent towards them in the past, and they even had to file a restraining order against him.
He's obsessed with his mom. And I don't know, I've seen some other weird things I don't want to say. Makes me think, other things are going on too.
Say it. What are you gonna say?
He believed that Rochelle and Dan didn't have a typical mother-son relationship.
He talks about some wild accusations about the possibility that Miss Demings and her son were engaged in sexual activity.
I think they sleep together a whole lot of times.
He would say that she would be on the phone with him, and he believed that they were having phone sex or something to that extent.
Anybody that stays on the phone with their son all the time, there's got to be something else going on.
It's a shocking claim, and one detectives take with a grain of salt.
That's not Rochelle. That's nasty. No. That's not who she was as a person. That's not who she was as a mother.
There was absolutely no proof, none. But Ronald Gamble felt so strongly that this woman should not be taking this good care of her adult son.
Ronald says 3 days ago, he found evidence that Rochelle was still taking care of Dan, even after they moved into their new condo to get away from him.
He was going through the mail on Friday the 13th.
He found mail addressed to Dan, and that set him off. He said there was no reason why Dan's mail should be coming to that address. Dan wasn't supposed to even know the address.
He will not leave us alone. And when I seen that mail with his name on it, and so now once I seen that, I said, he must have a key here. So now I'm heated.
He confronted Rochelle about what he discovered.
What's this doing in our mail?
I don't know. He even asked Rochelle if she had planned on giving a key to Dan to their new condo.
Tell me the truth. Did you give him a key?
What? No!
She kind of gets like, what are you talking about? She was like, oh, don't worry about that. So I'm like, really?
Rochelle tried to reassure Ronald that no, Dan had no idea of where they lived. However, Ronald was still infuriated. He was convinced that Dan was gonna ruin their lives again.
Rochelle, this is supposed to be a fresh start for us. I can't keep doing this.
Ronald says at that point, he just wanted to leave, but there was one problem.
His car wasn't working at the time.
I said, you know what? Just give me the key to your car, and I'm gonna go to Orlando and have somebody to come and get my car out of here.
He said Rochelle jumped in front of him, preventing him from leaving.
And she was like talking. To be honest, she was talking. So when I get by the door and getting ready to go out, she kind of pushed the door back, and I said, why you? And she slapped the out of me.
He said what happened next, he snapped.
In his words, he said, I hit her.
I'm not gonna lie, I hit her. I hit her.
In December of 2019, as most people are preparing for the upcoming holiday season, detectives in West Palm Beach are listening to a harrowing story from 48-year-old Ronald Gamble.
He admits that on Friday the 13th, he and Rochelle Demings got into a huge argument about her son. This was just 3 days before Rochelle's body was discovered.
With the argument becoming more and more heated, Ronald says he tried to leave.
So when I get by the door and getting ready to go out, she kind of pushed the door back, and I said, why you? And she slapped the out of me.
Ronald says that's when he snapped.
And I'm not gonna lie, I hit her. I hit her with my hand, and I might have hit her in her head really hard. I'm gonna be honest with you. So after I seen her do that, she fell to the ground, like right there.
But Ronald insists she was still alive.
You see her get up?
No, sir, to be honest, because I locked the door, trying to get out of there.
He got out the door and locked it behind him and never looked back. He said he went to visit a friend in Orlando.
Did she call you at all?
Actually, to be honest with you, I turned my phone off because I'm so pissed off with what's going on with her.
So then you left to go to
Orlando.
He said he drove 2.5 hours to Orlando in Rochelle's car to stay with a friend and clear his head.
We asked him, did you hit her hard enough that you could have killed her?
You don't think you could have hit her hard enough to kill her?
Don't tell me that.
He said what he did could not have caused her death the way it happened.
Ronald insists that when he returned home after spending the weekend in Orlando, he fully expected to find his girlfriend alive and well.
By the time he returned on the 16th, he was ready to have a conversation with Rochelle.
When you came home tonight, what time did you get there?
I'm gonna say it's after 12. I don't know exactly what time it was, but it had to be after 12.
He said the door was locked.
So when you opened the door and you walked in, what happened?
Immediately, he saw Rochelle lying in a pool of blood.
I kind of freak out, but I opened the door and I was like, oh my God, you know, but I closed the door back. Closed the door back because I don't know what's going on. She's not moving. So I jump over her and I immediately get on the phone and call 911.
West Palm PD, what's your emergency?
Come quick, my girlfriend needs help, please.
Ronald insists the only person who could have done this to Rochelle was her son, Dan.
He has this stuff to his mom in my presence, and I would have to intervene. Man, that dude was doing so much stuff to us.
But detectives aren't buying Ronald's story, and their suspicions are further confirmed by the results of Rochelle's autopsy report.
The autopsy reveals that due to the decomposition of her body, she actually died 3 days before she was found, which was December 13th.
That was the same day that Ronald admits to hitting her.
Rochelle had 5 deep lacerations to the top of her skull. She had a contusion to her lip, severe swelling to her left eye, and fractures to the orbital bone on her left side. The fatal wound was a lateral skull fracture on the back of her skull that essentially cracked her head open.
What are the odds that on the same day Ronald admits to getting into a physical altercation with her, someone else came in and essentially beat her to death?
However, detectives aren't ready to arrest Ronald for the crime just yet.
And if I just simply made an arrest fast, without evidence, without doing DNA and phone records and what have you, that's gonna hurt us. And I didn't want to do that.
So, detectives follow up with Rochelle's son, Dan.
They let him know right away that Ronald was trying to pin the crime on him.
Mr. Gamble basically was saying he didn't do it. And the only person he said was you.
Of course he was her.
Of course he did. So I have to come up here and talk to you about that.
Dan seems frustrated and offended that police even have to investigate Ronald's claims.
Had you and your mother ever gotten into a physical altercation before?
Never.
Do you have anything to do with your mother's death?
No, sir.
Dan says the only person who could have done this is Ronald Gamble.
Dan says that his mother's relationship with Ronald was rocky from the start, and it only got worse.
This guy is like a real jealous, controlling, like, I just call him the devil and I meant that for a reason.
Detectives in West Palm Beach, Florida, are speaking with the son of Rochelle Demings after her boyfriend, Ronald Gamble, implicated him for her gruesome murder.
They see that he's very torn up about losing his mother. Rochelle was his best friend, and he's so hurt that he lost her.
Do you have anything to do with your mother's death?
No, sir.
Dan says he believes that Ronald Gamble was his mother's killer and that their relationship was problematic from the very beginning.
So they met off like a dating site, and it was rocky. This was before I came down there. It was rocky. She had kicked him out. You know, my mom, she was a sucker for love.
Dan says Ronald tried to isolate his mother from the rest of their family.
He told my mother it was disrespectful. He talked to me while he's around. He told my mother that she think my mother's having sex with me.
Yeah, he mentioned that. I was going to ask about that. Why would he think that?
Because the way the relationship me and my mother, I don't know about what he thinks of sex. But one, like I told me, my mother was like this. You know what I'm saying? That was my best friend. We was tight. You know what I'm saying?
Dan admits that he and Ronald got into some physical altercations in the past, but says Ronald was the aggressor.
Had he ever been violent with her before?
Yes.
How so? What happened?
I hit him in the head.
Rochelle!
What?
Your card keeps getting declined.
I don't know what happened.
You know how embarrassing?
He ran to the store for my mom and got her 2 bottles of wine. She didn't have enough on her card, so he felt like embarrassed, you know what I'm saying? So he talking crazy to her. I'm standing out of it for the most part.
But when Ronald started calling his mother names, Dan couldn't stay out of it any longer.
Dan saw that Mr. Gamble was just taking advantage of Miss Demings and her kind nature, and Dan would get really, really upset.
Hey! What's how you talking to my mom like that, man? Who the hell are you talking to?
If y'all argue, y'all, you know what I'm saying? Don't call my mother name or none of that bullshit. So he, like, tried to hit me up.
Dan says his mother moved in to defend him.
My mom came and grabbed me, like, you know, get off my side. He pushed her to the ground.
Dan said he wasn't going to sit by and watch Ronald do that to his mother, so he grabbed the closest thing, which was the hot sauce bottle.
So I hit him in the head, you know, busted his head open. And it was self-defense, though. You know, it really was. So it was just Satan, man.
Get out! Before I call the cops.
He says after that incident, he knew that he couldn't go back to his mother's house.
We got to the point where I just couldn't be there, you know what I'm saying?
But Dan continued keeping tabs on his mother, worried for her safety.
I heard them in there arguing.
You don't understand. I don't know what stupid old
Because I couldn't get in, you know, I had no key. He really, like, took my arm life over for real, like, ran, you know. I think she was really scared.
He was so concerned about what was happening in the home, he did the next best thing that he thought he could do.
So I punched the window. Police came that day.
Mm-hmm.
And still started stuff. My mom got kicked out for that. So, you know, once she got kicked out of there, it was kind of my fault.
Dan admits when Ronald and his mother moved into their new condo, she didn't share the location with him, but she had good reason.
It wasn't because she was afraid of her son. It was because she was afraid of Ronald. She was trying to protect Dan until she could figure out a way to get away from Ronald for good.
So how did Dan's mail end up at the new condo?
They said, well, if you didn't know where your mother was living, why are you getting mail to her new place?
And Dan explained to them, because he was technically homeless, the mail that he was receiving at the other apartment was being forwarded to the new condo.
Did she give you a key?
I never knew where she stayed.
Detectives are inclined to believe Dan's version of events, especially when they sit down with Rochelle's other family members.
That's her heart. She loved him more than anything in this world.
You don't think he's capable of doing something like that?
I don't think he's capable of doing something like that to his mother.
Instead, they echo Dan's sentiments that Ronald Gamble is the one responsible for Rochelle's death.
She made the statement about, if anything happened to me, this MF did it.
They told police that Rochelle was in an abusive relationship. She wanted to leave Ronald, but she had to be strategic.
Rochelle had it, and she was done with this relationship. But as she told her friends and family members, she knew she couldn't just abruptly end it and walk away.
And Rochelle's family said she had good reason to be cautious.
Ronald was threatening to make her life hell if she tried to leave him.
She just kept saying he was blackmailing her. He was trying to exploit her for money, and he just wouldn't leave.
Ronald had some dirt on her that could possibly get her fired.
She had tried marijuana to help with her chronic nerve pain.
He ended up taking a picture of her smoking marijuana and then threatened to send it to her boss at the VA hospital. She had worked for the VA for over 30 years. She loved her job and she had so much to lose.
Ronald told Rochelle that she had to pay $1,200 to keep her secret.
And I'm like, you cannot get in trouble for what he's trying to blackmail you for. He can take a video of you smoking a cigarette and say it's weed. I'm like, only thing they can do is drug test you.
But Rochelle couldn't bear the idea of losing everything she'd worked for.
So she paid him $1,200.
Rochelle wanted to end it, but she knew he had a temper, so she was trying to do it delicately and to keep the peace. And some of her friends and family members got the impression that she was terrified of him.
She said, if anything happened to me, if I come up dead, if I come up missing, he did it.
And when detectives review surveillance from the evening of the murder, they feel even more confident in their case against Ronald Gamble.
We had video at the apartment complex, at least at the gates, to see what vehicles entered and exited and entered that night.
At no point does Dan or his vehicle enter the complex.
Homicide detectives in West Palm Beach investigating the mysterious death of 52-year-old Rochelle Demings believe that her live-in boyfriend, Ronald Gamble, is responsible for the crime.
Ronald tried to pin the crime on Rochelle's son, Dan. But during their investigation, police found his claims to be bogus.
Ms. Demings' son gave me his phone number, which we were able to use to see where he was on the night in question. His cell phone records show that he wasn't there.
Surveillance video from the apartment complex also proves Dan couldn't have been the person who killed his mother.
We had video at the apartment complex gates to see what vehicles exited and entered that night.
At no point does Dan or his vehicle enter the complex.
And the footage also shows Ronald leaving the complex several hours later than what he told investigators.
He left that apartment about 4 o'clock in the morning. So his version saying he was left at between 7:30 or 8 o'clock is not corroborated through the video at the front gate. He stayed there from the time of that fight until 4 o'clock in the morning, and Miss Demings is on the floor. If she's still alive, is she dead? He remains in that house with her and never calls 911. So that was something that I felt was very damning.
There was only one person who could have done it, one person who had motive, and that was Ronald.
And now police believe they have what they need to charge him with the crime.
Ronald was arrested for second-degree murder. There's a distinction in degrees between first-degree murder, second-degree murder, and manslaughter, and it all turns to intent.
I don't believe it was a first-degree murder. I don't believe that he planned to do this. I believe that maybe she did hit him and he lost his cool.
And as investigators prepare for trial, they learn Ronald had a dangerous pattern of manipulation that started long before he met Rochelle.
Detectives spoke with the friend in Orlando that Ronald claimed to stay with after the murder.
He agreed to come to the Orlando Police Department, where he provided us a statement as well. He talked about Mr. Gamble being a manipulator who always has different women in and out of his life.
As long as I've known him, he has gone from one woman to another and moved in and used them to help pay bills.
Finding out the type of person that Ronald was, he really didn't want anything to do with him.
So he was surprised when Ronald showed up at his Orlando home unannounced on the morning of December 14th.
Ronald told him that he needed help getting a one-way ticket to California.
One way?
Yep, one way.
Also, he said that Mr. Gamble got a new phone, or he saw him changing out the SIM card to his phone.
At no point did Ronald mention the fight that he had with Rochelle before he left.
So why did Ronald return to the scene of the crime instead of skipping town?
You're wondering, well, why did you come back? I guess in the end, he knew he had to come back because where was the car? Where's your car gone? And we would have been able to track that. So he had to come back and do something. He had to come back and have some sort of explanation. And then he just wanted to minimize his involvement in it the best he could. So he's kind of like a narcissist. He wanted to talk. He wanted to tell us his story.
In September 2023, Ronald Gamble's trial for second-degree murder gets underway. Prosecutors paint a picture of a resentful and jealous man who was bitter about Rochelle's unconditional love for her son.
Ronald didn't have that kind of relationship with his mother. It seemed very foreign to him. It seems like an attack. It seems like a threat.
The prosecution asserts that when Ronald saw the letters addressed to Dan, his frustrations exploded.
With Ronald's history of having unstable relationships, being impulsive, he does have the tendency to allow jealousy to come forth and manipulate his decisions. So with the rage, finding out that you are possibly lying to me because I saw the letter, that rage takes over.
You have such ill will, hatred, and spite that you take someone's life. And that is what Ronald Gamble did.
His story of I just hit her once or twice real hard, the injuries are not consistent with somebody just hitting you twice. That's not what happened. He smashed her head into the floor, which caused her death.
But Rochelle didn't die right away.
The question you have in the back of your mind is that if he did call 911 after he struck her, could she have survived her injuries? Could she still be with us today?
When it's the defense's turn, they argue that what happened to Rochelle was a tragic accident.
Their entire strategy at trial was to lessen the impact. They said, yes, he caused her death, but it wasn't murder, it was manslaughter. He didn't intend for her to die.
And to everyone's surprise, the jury agrees.
The jury actually had mercy on him, and he ended up getting convicted with manslaughter.
Rochelle's family is crushed because the manslaughter sentence only requires 3 years. Thankfully, the judge didn't go easy on Ronald, and she sentences him to the maximum, which is 15 years for manslaughter. But since he's getting credit for time already served, he will be eligible for parole in 2035.
It's infuriating. It's not enough for this angel, for this star, this bright light to have been just blown out like that. It's not, no. 99 years still wouldn't be enough.
Domestic cases always play to your heart because how could somebody that's supposed to love you do this to you?
Women who are in domestic violence situations should never suffer in silence. My advice is to get out of the situation as soon as possible.
And don't be afraid of judgment. Judgment will get you killed. The main thing is that you're around to tell your story. And in order to do that, in some cases, you have to utter the words, "I need help."
Year-old Idric Brister and his fiancée, John Treese Mims.
He got up, he got the children ready for school. That's the kind of guy he was. Very helpful, very genuine, just overall a good person. He came in the room and told me the children ready, I'm about to go, okay? I said, don't walk out this house without giving me a kiss. And he was like, oh, blushing. So he gave me a kiss. I was like, all right, go ahead. And I got up so I could get myself dressed. And he walked out the door.
As John Treese gets ready to take the kids to school, Idric leaves for work. He is only gone for a few moments when she hears the sound of gunshots.
I'm like, these dudes in New Orleans crazy. Like, it's too early to be out here shooting. And before I could get my shirt on, 2 other shots rung off. Like, those 2 was very close. So now I'm tripping. I don't have no shoes on my feet. I'm running outside. And Idric is laying on the ground at the end of my steps. Oh my God. I called the police first. I told them what happened. And I called his mama. I could barely speak. I just kept screaming like, this not real. Like who would do this?
Idric Eugene Brister was born on March 19, 1988, in New Orleans, Louisiana. The youngest of 5 children, raised by Arthur Gillum and Vicki Brister.
As a kid, Idric we used to have a name for him, and his name was Tasmania, because he was a busybody. Like, he was always into things.
He was very attentive, he was very smart. I taught him how to work on cars, I taught him how to fix things. I even taught him how to cook. He was just my right-hand man, and we did everything together.
Church was also an important part of Idric's life. Starting in the 6th grade, he was part of a youth program designed to keep kids off the streets.
They went out, they ministered to people. You know, if someone was going through something, they always assisting and talking to them and just showed love and helped them along the way.
But that didn't mean Idric was immune to making mistakes. As a teenager, he was arrested a couple of times for minor drug possession.
He has got into some trouble, and it's basically the same path, helping somebody. The first time he was riding with a friend, and the friend had marijuana. He wasn't smoking it, but the friend had marijuana when the cops stopped him, and it was in the car.
In his early 20s, he took the fall again, this time for a girlfriend.
That young lady had marijuana in the house, and it was hers, but he wouldn't dare let her go to jail, you know. So he took the charge, and he went to jail, even though he knew he had probation for marijuana.
It resulted in a 3-year prison sentence. But even behind bars, Idric tried to help others.
He just loves people. While he was serving his time, he was holding Bible studies, he was helping guys back there and, you know, ministering to them.
When he got out in 2014, Idric was even more focused on his faith. He even became a carpenter.
He worked for a construction company, Woodward. I mean, it was a blessing because, I gave him some of these talents. And in other words, I was duplicating myself in him, but to be better than I was.
I was so proud of Idric, trying to get back on the right track. And he assured me that, listen, I'm not going down that route ever again.
Then in 2017, Idric met the woman who would make his life complete, John Treese Mims.
July 7th, I talked to my cousin Brittany. She was like, you should swing through, we're going to a party tonight. I got there and Idric was frying fish. When I walked in the door, y'all, Idric was staring at me with this huge smile on his face. Never met this boy in my life. Like, who is this?
From the beginning, it seemed like a fairy tale.
Me and Idric talked the whole night. And we slept on a sofa together. Literally, like, talked until we fell asleep on the sofa. The next morning, me and Idric woke up before everybody. Idric set the table up like we was at a restaurant. So we eating breakfast, and he's still staring at me. And he was like, am I ever gonna see you again?
John Treese had had some not great relationships in the past, and this one felt so much healthier.
Soon as me and Idric started dating, we was glued. He was me and I was him. Like, we were one person for real. We went on 4 dates a week. We'll go uptown, we'll go out, we'll walk on Frenchmen, we'll go to museums, art galleries. No stopping. Like, he never had a moment where he was like, I need a break. He was just amazing.
While John Treese worked long hours as a nurse, Idric was there to help her with her children.
When I get home from work, Idric is on the floor with the children doing homework for hours. He has put them in a tub already. He done took Sky hair down. They done ate dinner. My dinner waiting for me. My children never experienced what Idric was showing us.
After only a few months, they both knew they wanted to spend the rest of their lives together.
Me and Idric found a house in the 17th that we wanted to move into. Idric took care of all the maintenance that had to be done. It wasn't inspected until January 8th. January 7th, on a Sunday, me and Idric went uptown and we driving around, we having the time of our life. We decided to go across the river by his family house because they was making music. Idric used to rap. And he was a poet, a very good one. We was making crazy songs, just everybody was having fun.
The celebration stretched into the early hours of the morning. Idric and John Treese finally headed home around 4 a.m. on January 8th.
He was driving fast because we both had to go to work. But he slowed down on the West Bank when we was passing up West Jeff Hospital and said, I'ma marry you. And I was blown away. He told me his mama had a ring. It was like, my mama got the ring and everything, I'm serious. Would you marry me? I was like, yeah, I'll marry you. We're singing songs all the way home at this point and both excited. We got home and it's like 5 o'clock. I don't think Idric slept at all because when I woke up, he was on the bed like this staring at me, asleep. So I was like, oh, why is you watching me sleep? Like, what's up? He was like, you're just so beautiful.
But just hours after they became engaged, the happiest night of their lives has suddenly turned into a nightmare. Now Idric lies unconscious and bleeding in front of their home, the victim of a shooting. He's alive, but barely.
The police get there and the ambulance there and all that, and they putting him on a stretcher. At this point, I didn't see where Idric was shot at. I just saw a bunch of blood.
When I arrived, I met with the units on scene and asked them what they have. They informed me that they had the victim, they had a single gunshot wound to the head. They also pointed out a bunch of .45 caliber cases. They were all located right around the victim.
To police, it looks like Idric was shot at close range. The fact that only one of the bullets hit him indicates the gunman wasn't experienced.
There were strike marks in a wall where, of course, he most likely missed. We weren't able to tell exactly which shot hit him, but I'll tell you this, where he got shot at, unfortunately, that would have dropped him right there where he stood.
This was a deliberate targeting of this young man.
Who in the world could possibly want to hurt Idric Brister?
29-year-old Idric Brister has been rushed to the hospital in critical condition following a shooting outside his New Orleans home. Investigators are now looking for clues to explain what happened.
We searched the area, maybe see if we could find some footprints or car, tire marks, anything like that to kind of lead us as to how this person got away from there, you know, a getaway car or something like that. We weren't able to find anything. All we had was casings, a victim, pretty much that's it.
Idric's new fiancé, Jontrese Mims, says it doesn't make any sense to her either.
He don't have beef with nobody. Like, this is the sweetest guy I know. I couldn't understand why somebody would want to do this to him.
I asked her, I said, well, what about yourself? Do you have anybody that maybe you having problems with or anything like that? She said no. She said she's a church-going person. She really doesn't have any problems like that.
I was so tore up. I'm like, it's gotta be mistaken identity. Like, my boyfriend don't mess with nobody.
Police know the area has experienced drug-related violence before, but according to Jontrese, Idric isn't involved in anything like that.
This isn't some drug deal gone wrong. There were no drugs on scene. Idric was an angel.
So at the time, we were thinking maybe it was a robbery. Maybe somebody was trying to carjack him.
But his car is still there. His wallet is still there. This isn't a robbery gone bad. This isn't a drive-by shooting either, because this isn't like there was a spray of bullets and a car screaming by. Somebody has to want to kill this man. It's an assassination.
The only person who might be able to give them answers is undergoing emergency surgery.
I'm newly engaged, and my fiance is hurt, and I can't talk to him.
When we got there, they said it didn't look good, but they said they're gonna do all what they can. And I expressed that, hey, do whatever you have to do in order to save him.
I paced a lot. I did a lot of pacing, you know, back and forth, just praying. And, you know, the doctors come out and they telling us that they went through like 33 pints of blood.
Several hours later, Idric is finally stabilized, but it's still unclear if he'll recover.
They let us see him later that night, and he wasn't himself no more. He didn't look like Idric. They did so much work on his head. Of course, he couldn't talk. He wasn't moving. His family, his brothers, and friends is like going crazy. Like, they're going crazy.
I conditioned myself at that time to say, okay, now you need to learn the truth of what's going on. You need to know why.
With emotions running high, Jontrese becomes the target of suspicion.
And I was just looking like the suspect to the family. Like, you gotta know something. He was with you.
My phone was blowing up, you know, and I started getting all kind of phone calls from his friends. And one friend in particular calls me. He says, Alicia, it's Jontrese, it's that girl. It's that girl, I'm telling you, it's that girl. Look into her, see something is going on. I went to her and I said, I think it's time we need to talk. So we took a long walk down the hall and we talked for maybe like a good hour.
Jontrese assures Idric's sister she had nothing to do with the shooting, but she is starting to suspect she might know who did. Her ex-boyfriend, Christopher Alexander.
Chris was my third boyfriend in my life. My kid's dad was my second. And I moved out of my mom's house and I let Chris come live with me. He had a daughter as well. I got a message from Chris saying, I heard what happened around now. I'm so sorry you're going through something like that. If you need me, I'm always gonna be here for you, etc., etc. Like, how you heard what happened around this, it ain't make it to the news yet. Even though Chris had friends in my neighborhood, you know, it's early in the morning. Nobody's really outside.
So I said to her, did he do this? And she said, there's nobody else that would want to hurt Audrey. Christopher was someone that helped bring up her kids. He had been in and out her life, but he did not want to let her go.
John Treese says when the relationship ended, Christopher didn't take it well. And when John Treese moved on, he became jealous of Idric.
So now that I'm understanding like the whole elements of their relationship and this whole triangle that's going on, I say you need to get up and you need to go to the nearest police station.
She said, go talk to the police, say something, fight for my brother. Don't let his life just be in vain. Like, you know, he would have did it for you, do it for him. And she was right.
I sit on the 4th floor praying, God, hear my prayer. This is me begging God, like, please.
With her fiancé, Idric Brister, still in critical condition, John Treese Mims talks to police about a possible suspect. Her ex, 27-year-old Christopher Alexander.
I met Chris 2010 after I had my son. He worked in the service industry and I worked in the nursing field, and we really was growing up together.
John Treese and Chris were together for nearly 4 years, but eventually it began to feel like John Treese was carrying most of the load.
I paid the rent, the lights, the water, the phone bills, the food, took care of the children, everything. I was doing everything by myself. And I got tired. I decided to move to South Carolina, and I homeschooled my children in the mountains.
The separation only lasted 3 months. When John Treese returned home for Christmas in 2014, she wound up getting back together with Chris.
It's not a surprise because she had been involved with him for so long. It was very difficult to just cut that off mentally, as well as spiritually sometimes. And they were very young.
But the relationship quickly soured again when Chris revealed a heartbreaking secret.
He didn't even know how to tell me. Like, I remember he just bust out crying in the living room and told me a girl had called him and told him that she had a child for him. So he basically was messing with the girl before I left New Orleans, but he didn't think it was gonna be nothing like he got her pregnant. After that happened, we broke up.
Still, Chris wasn't ready to give up.
He came to my church and he proposed to me in front of my church. I kept saying, Chris, no, 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 please stop. Like, cause he's on a microphone saying my whole name, like John Treese Yvonne Mims, would you please? I said yes.
John Treese immediately knew that was a mistake.
So now I'm kind of like trying to find a way to tell him this is not what I want. Because when Chris get heartbroken, he gets so heartbroken. I mean, like, cry 4 hours on my sofa, on my porch.
John Treese tells police that she stayed with Chris for a while. But by 2017, she'd had enough.
It was like, you know, I had too much evidence that Chris wasn't gonna grow up no time soon. I feel like I'm raising Chris at this point. We both the same age, you should know better. I decided that I didn't want to go further in our relationship and I left Chris alone completely.
Shortly after that, John Treese met Idric. But Chris wasn't ready to move on.
Chris is in denial at this point. He thinks, okay, well, you know, she's always been there, she'll always be there.
Chris was going crazy. He was calling my phone, talking about he hate me, I ruined his life. I just wasn't answering him.
However, ignoring Chris didn't make the problem go away.
He was calling everybody in my family. He's dragging for me on social media.
Instead of confronting Chris, Eidrick decided to take a more charitable approach.
Eidrick definitely seems like a compassionate person. He had the insight to see that Chris was hurting at the time, and he does not want to hurt anybody.
Right before Thanksgiving, me and the kids and Eidrick went to church. And Chris was at church, and Eidrick was like, I feel so bad for Chris. So when we left church, Eidrick told me to check on Chris. I called him and checked on him, and I thought that was gonna be the end of it. He seemed like really happy to see me. He thought that, you know, we could be friends.
Now, John Treese thinks that was another mistake.
I told the detective, I just wanna put it out there. If it could be him, like, find out what's going on for me, please.
The first thing I did, I wanted to see the social media myself. I wanted to see exactly what she was talking about. I'll be honest, looking at his page, he seemed like a real church-going guy. I was kind of on the fence, like, whether is this guy involved or do we just have the wrong person?
Then, investigators find something that changes their minds. One of Chris's posts is a video of him practicing at a gun range.
Really didn't look like he knew what he was doing. It really looked like he was kind of out of his place, just maybe, it was weird.
New Orleans police suspect Christopher Alexander might be connected to the shooting of 29-year-old Eidrick Brister. But his loved ones have other things on their minds. After 2 days waiting by his bedside, it becomes clear he's not going to recover.
I wake up on the 10th and I'm shaking up. And God says to me, Alicia, you have to let him go. He wants to leave.
On the morning of January 10th, the family decides to take him off life support.
They came and spoke with me about being an organ donor. I said he already is an organ donor. So they had me to sign papers to release of his organs and so forth. And from that point, we went in the room and prayed. I talked with him, gave him a hug, gave him a kiss, and told him I'll see him on the other side.
My mama came in the room on the phone, and she was like, Tree, let me talk to you. He fought a good fight. I was like, what you mean he fought? Like, that's a past tense statement, like, and they told me he didn't make it. I was just in a state of disbelief and awe. I couldn't get words to come out.
For investigators, the case has now become a homicide. And on January 11th, they speak to the man they believe is responsible.
I asked John Treese if she had a phone number on Christopher. I gave him a call. Honestly, it was just a blind call. Hey man, how you doing? I'm Detective Johnson. Would you mind coming down to speak with me? Surprisingly, he immediately said, yeah, I'll come down, which kind of gave me a little indication he knows what's going on. When Christopher arrived at my office, he arrived there with his mom. She walked to me and said, look, I'm scared for my son. I told her, just give me a second, let me speak to Christopher by himself, and I'll come back and talk to you. When Christopher agreed to come into the interview room with me, we sat down. First thing I did, I introduced myself. And then I read off our Miranda rights form. I asked him if he knew why he was here. He said yes. He said that people were saying he had something to do with John Treese's boyfriend getting killed.
But Chris claims he couldn't have shot Eidrick because he was with a dancer he met online.
He said, I met a girl the day before named Candy. I met her on Instagram, and she wanted to hook up with me that day, which was kind of weird to me because this shooting happened at 6 o'clock in the morning. He seemed really nervous. He was sweating, he was stuttering while he was talking, fidgeting with his hands. All signs that any seasoned detective would know is you're most likely being untruthful about something, you're hiding something.
To test Chris, Detective Johnson leads him to believe they have evidence that he's lying.
I told him, I said, hey man, look, I have surveillance video from the area. I saw you there. I know you're involved with it. Come clean. And I'm staring at him. We got quiet for a little while. You hear the little clock in the corner just tick, 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 ticking away.
And then, after what seems an eternity,
he looked down. He looked back up and he was like, I did it. I killed him.
When Detective Johnson asks him to explain further, Chris suddenly goes quiet. So, the detective tries a different tactic.
I asked him if he would mind if I bring his mom in. He said yes. I walked the mom in, and she tells me about people threatening her son and all these things that were going on. I looked at her, I said, look, we're here, you're in the police station, but you don't need to take any of this that we talk about and tell it to the world. You don't need to do that.
And so he went on and he confessed it to his moms, what he had done.
Chris says he took a cab to John Treese's house the morning of January 8th and waited, hiding outside. And when he saw Eidrick leave for work, he fired, missing the first few times.
He told me he shot the victim in the head. He had one single gunshot wound. By him having that information, I knew he was the person, because nobody else should know that. His mom, she's just over there just looking. She almost has a blank stare on her face because I don't think she was ready for what she was hearing also. At that time, I authored an arrest warrant. He was placed under arrest.
We thought it was a slam dunk. He goes to prison, and serve his time and just move on in life.
But there's a major problem for the prosecution.
The issue was that confession was tainted. The defense counsel had taken writs up to the Fourth Circuit and then ultimately to the Supreme Court, saying that some of the things that the detective on the case had said in the interrogation room had mitigated the Miranda warnings. And the Miranda warnings being, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law.
The defense argues that the detective suggested to Christopher and his mother that what they said in the interrogation room was confidential.
It goes all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they threw it out.
The statement was tossed out because they believed that I gave him the impression that whatever he tells me is not going to go to court. That's not what I said. When his mother walked in, she was scared. She was scared for her son. I said, look, what we talk about is not for you to go tell the world. Then I turned back to Christopher, who was already Mirandized and understood he was in a police station talking to a detective, a homicide detective.
But without further evidence, prosecutors know there's a good chance Christopher will go free.
We don't have anything besides this confession from this defendant and a lot of what we'd call circumstantial evidence. What isn't conclusively is saying he did it for sure. So I'm walking into a case that's more or less dead on arrival.
In addition to the inadmissible confession, legal wrangling that upsets Eidrick's family and the revelation of a surprise motive means the drama of this story is far from over.
In a circumstantial case, the evidence points towards a particular defendant, but doesn't actually have direct evidence, right? Direct evidence would be if a witness, saw the crime. From one fact, you can jump to a conclusion about that fact, but you have to make that jump. And so when you have too much circumstantial evidence that points in his direction, but isn't conclusively as saying he did it for sure, you're making that jump get farther and farther. And that's what the challenge for a jury is you have to.
Despite having Christopher Alexander's confession ruled inadmissible, prosecutors assure Eidrick Brister's family they're not giving up.
I try to be as empathetic as I possibly can with surviving family members because they are going through the worst experience of their life. And I promise them I'm going to do everything I possibly can to see the case through to the end, no matter what. The Supreme Court had suppressed Christopher Alexander's confession, but they had suppressed it after Detective Rael Johnson was trying to alleviate the mom's concern, but what Alexander said before was all admissible, right? So we have all that part of his statement to work with. He made this story up that he was in the area because he was going to meet a stripper that he had met on Instagram. However, there's no evidence of that anywhere in his phone, right? Anywhere on his Instagram. So we can shoot holes in that.
My next step was go over to the cab company and speak with them. That morning, maybe at like 5:45, a little bit before 6 o'clock, he caught a cab ride over to the location. The interesting thing is that he gave the location that is directly behind the house where the murder happened. He gave the exact address, he just gave a different street.
But it's still not the hard evidence prosecutors are looking for.
You know, we had a case that was circumstantial. We could put him near the scene, but we didn't have enough really to link him beyond a reasonable doubt to the murder.
The family, you know, they were distraught, and they were at a point of desperation where, you know, they wound up talking to, you know, the media about what occurred, and they were upset with me. And guess what? I can't even blame them.
2 years passed with no further movement on the case, leaving the prosecution team little choice but to attempt a plea bargain.
It was my hope, rather than go into a trial where we've got a very, very low chance of winning, that we come to some sort of terms on a reconciliation. And so I approached the new defense counsel with that idea. He would admit guilt, admit that he did this, and pleaded the crime of manslaughter.
Manslaughter comes in when it's what? Some crime of passion, you know, some relationship just went bad, an argument or something of that nature. So in that situation, the mitigating factor is, hey, let's try to get a manslaughter, and then the judge can sentence him in this state from 0 to 40 years, and not life.
But Idrik's family sees it as a betrayal.
I would not allow it. I mean, he admitted doing it. That wasn't right. So I was in their office almost every week.
In 2021, the family's persistence pays off when the newly elected district attorney instructs prosecutors to drop the plea bargain and start over.
I close all the loops with Detective Johnston. We check off every lead has been run down, every possible avenue of evidence has been uncovered.
We did a search warrant for his social media. At that time, we were able to get back all of the conversations that they were having. And also John Treese, she provided us with some of the conversations because she had access to it.
You could see through the fall, I guess, of 2017, right? As they kind of escalate, he goes from just, I'm sorry, I love you, I want to get back together with you, to all caps, to why are you doing this to me? Why are you ripping out my heart?
One series of messages reveals a bombshell of a motive.
I slept with Chris that November of 2017. And I told Idrik. He told me he knew. He said he thought it would happen multiple times before I actually would be honest and tell him. But this was already at the time I stopped answering Chris messages.
Chris is desperate. He feels like he needs John Treese. He's not going to survive without John Treese.
If Chris was hoping Idrik would kick John Treese out, he was disappointed.
Idrik told me, like, we gonna be good and everything gonna be fine.
There was only one way Chris could get her back.
I think this is the point when he decided he was gonna kill Idrik Brister. Not because he hated Idrik Brister, but because he loved John Treese Mims.
In 2022, more than 4 years after Idrik Brister was murdered, the case finally makes it to trial. Prosecutors still don't have any physical evidence proving Christopher Alexander pulled the trigger, but they're hoping circumstantial evidence and testimony from John Treese Mims will be enough to sway the jury.
I'm extremely scared, but I know I gotta do it. I know I gotta get past this. I gotta get it done. Idrik was my strength. When I got there, I saw Idrik's daddy, Arthur, and Alicia. I wanted to hug them, but they told us we couldn't really talk to each other. They set me in a room right outside the courtroom, and I saw Chris. He looked me in my eyes, Like, I just still love you to death. I don't care. No remorse in his eyes. And it made me sick to my stomach because you really a devil. Like, you really evil. You done went all these years and ain't find no type of peace within yourself. You don't want to say sorry.
During the trial, John Treese got up there, and I'll be honest with you, that was very emotional to see her up there speaking about, what occurred. Never in her wildest thoughts thought that Christopher would do something like this.
And I broke down on the stand. Like, I went through a couple of years of trying to forget all of that and just keeping my good memories with Audric in my head. But it brought me back to what I went through.
John Treese tells the jury about her tumultuous relationship with Chris and his escalating anger when she wouldn't take him back.
He was still in love with her, but she didn't want to be with him anymore. He was begging her, he was pleading her to be with her.
But she's not responding, and it seems like she's finally moved on with her life. She's with a better man, somebody that's more responsible, and reciprocating the love and support that she gives. So Chris then decides, okay, well, I'll show you how much of a man I really am. I'm not a child. I'm gonna go and get a gun, and I'm gonna show you what I really can do, because now I feel disrespected.
Our motive was probably the strongest aspect of this case. Who in the world could possibly want to kill Audric Brister? And that is a small number of people, right? And I think it's so small that there's really only one person.
But the defense argues none of it proves Chris murdered Audric Brister.
The first thing you always tell your clients is, you don't have to prove anything or disprove anything. The state must prove your guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. This is what we call circumstantial evidence, right? And the law says that must exclude every other reasonable hypothesis of innocence.
The defense believes the state hasn't met that burden of proof.
His lawyer had him gassed up that he was about to get out of here and he was going scot-free. But in my heart and from all the work that I've done, I knew this guy was guilty, no doubt. Now, my thing was to see if the jury was going to side with me also.
The jury deliberates for less than 3 hours before delivering their verdict.
All 12 jurors found him guilty of second-degree murder.
I'm gonna tell you, that was a weight off my chest because I felt like I let that family down with what happened with the piece of that statement that got thrown out. This is what I love to do, and I love to be able to give families closure.
Christopher Alexander is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But for the loved ones of Audric Brister, the victory is bittersweet.
It's a love triangle case that ends in the worst possible way because both these young men are gone from society now, right? Audric to never return, and Christopher Alexander also to never return from jail. So it was an absolute tragedy in all parts, and John Treese, is there at the middle of it all.
It's still just so heartbreaking. Losing me, I don't feel like was worth you throwing your whole life away. You took somebody away from their family, away from their friends, an amazing person, away from me, away from my children, an unforgettable person who didn't deserve that at all.
I believe he's still here. He hears me. He knows me. I talk to him. He taught me the core and essence of what we're really here for, and as other people, and to love them where they are until they get to where you need them to be.
It gives me a great joy to see all the work that my son has done. So there was 5 people that received organs, but if you was at the funeral, it was more than 5 lives that he saved.
I definitely feel like Audric was sent in my life to implement change. I became a better parent, a better friend, a better sibling. I'm more forgiving, empathetic, and all these things are things he taught me when he was here.
Just thank God for the time and the memories that he allowed me to spend with my son and his son. And, it's a lot of good times, a lot of good memories.
have to flee. I have to get away.
In this first episode of a two-part special, we reveal a tragic tale of greed.
There was an uptick in robberies involving wigs and other hair products.
And bitter revenge.
It was the worst night and the worst phone call that I have ever received.
And a payback story where nothing is as it first seems.
Now the police cannot trust anything that she says.
It was hard to believe that someone that young was going to be involved in something like this.
At 3:25 p.m. on January 22, 2016, police in Memphis, Tennessee, received multiple 911 calls about shots fired in an apartment complex near a school in the eastern suburb of Cordova.
The crime rate was lower in that area than some others, and to hear those shots ring out startled neighbors, startled children.
Children are being released out of school. To have those kids being released, getting off the bus, and this type of event is taking place, had to have been really scary.
Memphis police respond quickly.
They see this young man laying in the parking lot in his own blood with multiple gunshot wounds.
Officers secure the area, finding no sign of an active shooter.
They see that they're not in danger. They see that they can't save him. He's pronounced dead at the scene.
A wallet in the man's pocket contains a driver's license.
They are able to ID the body of the male deceased victim as Eddie Tate Jr.
There is no shortage of stunned onlookers in the parking lot.
This is in the middle of the day. It's in an apartment complex. So once these shots were fired, there was a lot of activity. We had multiple witnesses.
They report seeing a dark green Honda in the lot. After the gunshots, a black woman got out of the Honda and did something unexpected.
This woman exited the vehicle, came around to the driver's side, removed Eddie Tate's body.
A female drags the male victim out of the vehicle, gets in the vehicle and drives off. So on the surface, we're thinking, carjacking.
Is Eddie's death a tragic case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or is there more to this chaotic scene than meets the eye?
We quickly realized that it was not what we thought it was in the beginning.
Edward James Tate Jr. was born on August 27, 1985, to parents Eddie Tate Sr. and Gloria Adams.
And he was born in Shelby County, Memphis, Tennessee, at St. Francis Hospital, 6 pounds and 11 ounces. Bouncing, handsome boy. To me, my pride and joy, my only child.
Growing up in the small town of Oakland, just east of Memphis, Eddie, known to his friends and family as EJ, was independent and curious.
EJ, he was different. He's very quiet. He's well-mannered. He read a lot of books, and he was intelligent. He stayed to himself. He was a loner.
In 2000, Eddie entered Fayette Ware High School in Somerville, where he emerged from his quiet shell and eventually became vice president of his freshman class.
He went there for 4 years, and when he after graduated, he went to ITT, technical school. He majored in engineering. And for some reason or another, he didn't want to actually continue doing engineering. He wanted to be more out there on his own.
Around 2005, Eddie went into business with his cousin Mario.
Mario wanted to do hair. He said hair was on the market. It was really gonna sell and make money. So he told EJ he wanted him to come into the business with him. So EJ said, oh, okay.
The culture in Memphis with hair or weaves, it's huge, especially within the Black community. Our hair is very important to us because just from the beginning of time, it was the one thing I believe we could kind of own. So coming to, America, being, enslaved, oftentimes we didn't have control of our bodies. The hair was the one thing we could kind of, it could give us our own personality and our own sense of self.
And so if you come to Memphis, Tennessee, you will see that everybody's hair is done to a T, and if it's not done, they're headed there. And this is not just for women. This is for men as well. They spend hours in the barbershop. They spend hours at salons. And so this is a cultural thing.
Eddie and Mario focused on importing and selling natural human hair of the highest quality. It was more expensive, but they wanted to offer the best.
It's hair that's untreated, unbleached, untampered with in any way. It's pure hair.
Just to go to a storefront to buy your hair, it's not always the best choice. So EJ offered that. EJ offered this luxury hair. And the best part about it, he would deliver it to you.
A lot of people, especially in certain communities, expect that you're going to be able to, if you're paying $200, $300, $400, $500, $1,000, that you might, be able to get this hand delivered to you as well.
In his personal life, Eddie was also building a future with his new wife.
EJ had gotten married, and during that time, they had moved to Mason, Tennessee, up in Covington. They was inseparable. They did everything together. Their love was unique. They was great together.
In 2009, the couple welcomed a daughter. Eddie was a devoted father, but he struggled to remain a committed husband.
He had wandering eyes. EJ went to wandering a little bit. His attention went to branching out. Finally, they decided they would go their own separate ways.
Although Eddie moved back to his childhood home in Somerville, he and his ex worked together to co-parent their daughter.
There's no arguing, no feuding, no disagreement. They would all be courteous to each other.
And in his professional life, Eddie and his cousin Mario continued to expand their business, dubbed Virgin Hair for Us.
And they both would go out in different separate areas in Fayette County and do the hair. Well, as they continued to do hair, their name became very popular. Then they decided, well, we're going to branch out more than Fayette County. We're just doing great with hair. So then it came into Shelby County.
Business was booming, but Eddie was lonely.
Maybe 2 years later, he met Edwina. We called her Wee Wee.
Edwina Marquette Thomas worked at a local hospital and was a single mother to 2 daughters. She made a strong first impression.
I think EJ fell in love with her because of her smile. Edwina has the prettiest smile that you have ever seen. She was just a good person, all around.
He said, Ma, I met a girl. He said, she quiet. She has 2 children. I said, oh, okay. And he said, he said, she got a sweet family. She got a sweet family.
Soon after they started dating, Eddie brought Edwina and her daughters to meet his mother.
They all came to attend my birthday. And it was always a joyful event. They was close. You could tell.
A few months later, the couple decided to move in together.
She had a genuine love. She did. You could see it on her face. She loved EJ. And EJ was with her, and he was happy.
On January 22, 2016, the couple's future is shattered by bullets. Eddie Tate Jr. lies dead in the parking lot of an apartment building in a Memphis suburb. Witnesses have described a car and a woman they think were part of the incident.
There was a green Honda Civic, a female passenger in the vehicle who later removed Eddie's body from the vehicle, jumped into the driver's seat, and fled the scene.
Then, investigators learned that there was another suspicious vehicle that might have been involved.
One of the witnesses that I spoke to had said that they saw two cars driving away real fast right after the shots. One of them was green, the other was a gray or silver car.
A witness was able to identify both the green Honda Civic that was there on the scene minutes before the shooting took place. Also exiting the scene, a witness was also able to identify a silver Mitsubishi.
They both, once the shooting was over, fled at a high rate of speed. We assumed that one of them would have been a suspect car, one of them would have been a victim car. But, of course, at that time, we didn't know for certain.
Memphis detectives continue to work the scene of a shooting that left 30-year-old Eddie Tate Jr. dead. Multiple witnesses recall a green Honda and a silver Mitsubishi fleeing the scene in the moments after the shots rang out.
As it turns out, our witnesses hear the gunshots. There's anywhere from several seconds to a minute delay. Then they look out and see what they see. So we did not actually have an eyewitness to the shooting. We had multiple witnesses that saw right after what transpired.
Some saw a young black woman in the green car. Another saw the driver of the silver car, who was also a young black woman.
They look out and then they see her running toward a silver Mitsubishi. She falls and then she gets in the vehicle by herself and drives off at a high rate of speed.
The same witness has another important piece of information: the tag number for the silver car.
They gave that to the officers. The officers put out a broadcast to be on the lookout for it.
The witness accounts are consistent when it comes to the woman in the green Honda and the woman in the silver Mitsubishi. But from there, the details vary, including a possible third woman.
Several of the witnesses saw someone in multicolored leggings go inside the victim's green Honda.
They may or may not be looking for a third person, the person who is rummaging through the vehicle.
Witnesses, they see different things at different times. I may see you in a green shirt. Someone else may see you in a dark colored shirt. So, and that's kind of the situation that we ran into. Several clothing descriptions, several activities that people were doing, and we had to, kind of weed through that.
While detectives continue taking statements, forensic techs scour the crime scene for evidence.
Homicide detectives look at the body. They see that Eddie Tate Jr. was shot 4 times.
They found several projectiles and casings from a 9mm. Without the gun, you couldn't tell for sure. It is very likely that they all came from the same 9mm handgun.
Eddie Tate's wallet was accounted for. There was still money present in Eddie Tate's wallet.
Then, detectives get word that the chaos isn't over. It's still unfolding just around the corner.
Someone had come and flagged down some officers and said, hey, that they had a female that pulled up in front of their apartment that was beating on their door. When they opened the door, she said, "I'm shot, and he's dead."
EMS, the ambulance, and other first responders rushed to the scene because the victim in this instance is still alive.
She wasn't talking. She was on her way to unresponsive.
By the time detectives arrive, The woman is already being rushed to the hospital. But outside the apartment, investigators spot the dark green Honda with a broken window and 2 bullet holes.
We have, this female that shot, and then their car's parked outside, and I looked in it, and it's all covered in blood. I talked to the people in the apartment, and basically that's, their story was that they were at home, and then all of a sudden they hear a knock on the door, someone screaming for help. They opened the door, and she says that she's been shot.
She was losing breath, like she was running out of breath, so they had her sit down. And she said as she sat down, the lady had a yellow couch, if I'm not mistaken, and she said the couch just started turning red. And she said at that moment, that's when they realized, okay, we need to get her help.
Investigators theorized the woman was also a victim in the attack, sitting in the passenger seat of the Honda when gunfire erupted.
Her survival instincts kicked in, and she knew, I have to flee. I have to get away. She immediately went into action. She pulled Eddie out of the car. She got over in that driver's seat and she fled. She drove herself to safety, trying her best to save herself.
I can't imagine how she was feeling at the time, knowing I'm fighting for my life.
Detectives learned the woman is undergoing emergency surgery at a local hospital. She has been identified as 33-year-old Edwina Wee Wee Thomas, the girlfriend of the other shooting victim, Eddie Tate.
They were doing everything they could to keep her alive.
Memphis, Tennessee is a very grimy, gritty, and tough city. And Memphis is one of those places where the code of the street abounds, from a toddler all the way to the pastor in the pulpit, where there's a certain edge, where there's a certain aspect where you cannot see one semblance of weakness, because the streets of Memphis will eat you alive. Even though Memphis is not the most prosperous and influential place in the world when it comes to money, the people are proud. The people are proud of what they come from.
Edwina Thomas, known to loved ones as Wee Wee, is undergoing surgery at a hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. The single mother sustained multiple life-threatening gunshot wounds during the attack that killed her boyfriend, Eddie Tate Jr.
We know that there is a dead male on the scene and a victim that has been shot, transported to the hospital. So then, of course, we sent an investigator to the hospital, but she was already in surgery.
While they await word from doctors, detectives need to have a difficult conversation with Eddie's loved ones.
I was asked to make the notification to Eddie Tate's family. Once I get there, I explain to them who I am, what I'm here for.
He said, Miss Tate, you might want to sit down. And he came in and I said, where is he in the med? That's when you get hurt so bad. I said, he in the med. And he said, no. And I said, why are you here? And he said, ma'am, I got to tell you, your son is gone. I said, gone? He said, he got killed. The policeman said he got killed. And I fell to my knees. And I just screamed. I couldn't even scream. And I said, Lord God, you took my baby. You took all I had in life. And I just started crying and screaming. And I said, who killed him? Who killed my child? And he said, whoever killed him, they got away.
And it's not just Eddie who was shot.
And he said, well, we got shot in numerous places too, in her stomach and other places on her body. He said, but she's in a bad shape too.
The news is even more brutal given what Eddie shared with Gloria just 2 days before.
He called me that Wednesday night. He said, you might be getting another little grandbaby. And I said, oh, well, I'm slow. I said, another grandbaby? I said, where? Mom, what you mean, where? I said, oh, wait. Like that, I said, oh, we be pregnant. He said, yeah, we be pregnant.
Eddie's mother goes on to tell investigators that her son and his cousin Mario ran a cash business selling expensive hair bundles. That meant meeting up with people they sometimes didn't know, all while carrying large amounts of cash.
Virgin hair starts at about $120, and that's really just for a straight, let's just say 10 to 12 inch. The more you go up in inches, the more costly it is. If you're looking for anything over 22 inches, it's very possible for you to spend in the thousands for those.
As a precaution, she says, Eddie never went on deliveries alone.
Wherever he was at to go deliver the hair, he always would have a rider. I would ride with him, or his girlfriend would ride with him, but he always had just one person that would ride with him to deliver all the hair.
Eddie's mother tells investigators that Eddie and Edwina were making deliveries on the day of the shooting.
He had called me at 2 o'clock that day. He said, oh, I'll just call to holler at you. I said, okay. I said, what you finna do? He said, well, I got this old chicken head. I'm finna go sell some hair to it.
He did not name the buyer, but said she was a repeat customer.
He said, I sold some hair to her this morning at 8 o'clock. And he said, I'm gonna go take the hair, take her some hair, take hair back to her. She said it wasn't the right length and she didn't like it. And she called me back and said that she wanted her money back. And he said, you know, we don't give money back. I let her know I'll give her a different grade of hair. I'll let her look at some more hair, but we don't refund the money.
Eddie had his wallet on him when he was found, but it did not contain the amount of money expected after a big sale. Also, investigators did not find any bundles of hair in Eddie's green Honda. As investigators wrap up with Gloria, they know there is still one person who might be able to tell them what happened: Edwina.
The police would say, we rushed her to the hospital. I said, well, he said, well, maybe she'll gain consciousness where she can talk and tell who had actually did the shooting.
Investigators in Memphis are looking into the brutal midday shooting of Eddie Tate Jr. and Edwina Thomas. Witnesses had seen Edwina drive off in Eddie's green Honda, as well as another woman driving another car.
There was a silver Mitsubishi that was also unseen, and a witness was able to at least provide the details, including the license plate of that vehicle.
Some witnesses also reported a possible third woman wearing multicolored leggings, rummaging through Eddie's car after the shots rang out. When detectives check on Edwina, doctors advise that her injuries are critical. She has 2 gunshot wounds, one to her kidney and intestine, and the other to her left forearm. But there's more: the poignant and harrowing detail that Edwina is 8 weeks pregnant. It's unclear whether Edwina and her unborn child will survive. Edwina Marquette Thomas was born on June 13, 1982, in Fayette County, Tennessee. She grew up with 2 sisters, 4 brothers, and a host of cousins.
Our family is pretty huge. We would all just meet at my grandmother's house on Sunday.
The older people, they would cook, and the younger crowd, like we're outside having water balloon fights, and it was a great feeling, like just to have your family around.
Wee Wee was my first cousin, but we kind of grew up as sisters. Just a great person, an amazing person, amazing friend, my very first best friend.
As a big sister, she was like a second mom. She treated me like her kid.
She liked to pull the big sister card to let me know, hey, I'm the boss, mom's gone, you have to listen to me. So sometimes we bumped heads, but for the most part, it was fun. I hung out with her a lot. She kind of taught me a lot.
As a teenager, Edwina attended Fayette Ware High School in Somerville, where she commanded attention.
We loved clothes. Like, she loved to look nice, she loved to dress nice, and she loved boys. She was popular with the guys, so I guess that's a good thing.
In 1999, Edwina fell in love.
That was her man, that was her boyfriend, that was her first real solid love.
Edwina became pregnant, but soon after the birth of her daughter, the relationship ended.
Just like any other breakup, in the beginning it's not good. But as we got older, you know, and you understand that parenting is the most important thing, they reconnected, and so they ended up on good terms, which is a good thing.
Edwina took the responsibilities of being a single mom head on.
She did go on to Concord Medical, so she got a degree from there, and she started working at the hospital.
Over the next few years, Edwina gave birth to another daughter and faced more heartbreak in her personal life.
She really didn't date much until she met Crystal's dad, which was her second daughter. So then after those two, she met a new boyfriend. They had moved in together, plans on marriage, but he got into a motorcycle accident and he passed away.
The loss was devastating. Edwina was unsure if she would love again.
She just, was still dealing with that grief before she opened back up to someone else.
Eventually, that someone was Eddie Tate Jr.
When she started to date him, we saw a totally different side of her. It's like a more open, more loving, she just was happier. She was a happier person when she met him. You could just tell, like, he really cared, and he was her protector.
But now, Eddie has died from 4 gunshot wounds, and Memphis doctors fight to save Edwina's life. However, her injuries are too severe.
Edwina was later pronounced at the hospital.
It means her baby passed away too. For the second time in a matter of hours, detectives must deliver devastating news to another family.
My mom called and I merged her in with me and my sister, and she was crying.
I just remember her saying, "She's gone, somebody killed her." And at that moment, I remember dropping the phone and I fell to the floor. I fell to the floor crying. I could hear my mom crying. I could hear my brother crying.
That night was one of the, I'm not gonna say one of the worst nights. It was the worst night and the worst phone call that I have ever received in 34 years of living.
For detectives working the case, news of Edwina's and her unborn child's deaths means that the stakes are even higher.
She was about 6 to 8 weeks pregnant, meaning that law enforcement, they're no longer dealing with a homicide or a double homicide. Now they're dealing with a triple homicide.
Know that, in the very beginning of slavery, one of the first things that was done is that, the enslaved heads were shaved. That held significance primarily because, from the motherland, different tribes had different hairstyles, and, you'd be able to recognize that, due to whatever intricate nature of style that may have had. So stripping the enslaved of really those hairstyles because their hair was shaven, it erased a total, sense of self, their culture, and all of these things. So that, again, was kind of one of the very first ways that our hair was policed, if you will. And it also served to, again, just take something that held so much pride for so many people, and was able to really distinguish subcultures within a culture. And that's kind of where we are today.
This was a young couple and a child that had not been born yet. So it pulled on the heartstrings of many. And with that, the community, law enforcement, families, the families of the victims, they wanted justice.
Detectives have one lead, a silver Mitsubishi witnesses saw speeding from the scene. A bolo on the vehicle's tag number produces nothing. Then, an officer notices a critical mistake.
The tag number on the vehicle, either between the witness calling in or the dispatcher, the last number was either transposed or it was incorrect.
So initially, we were looking for the wrong car.
And one of the officers changed the number up on the last digit, and it came back to a silver Mitsubishi. Had an address about 3 miles away from the shooting scene.
And records eventually reveal a very surprising person of interest.
Detectives determined that the driver of that silver Mitsubishi is 18-year-old high school student Victoria C.
Investigators run Victoria's name through a database of criminal records.
Victoria, she has a clean record. She's never been in trouble with the law.
The first thing that I really recognized was that she was really young. You know, it was hard to believe that someone that young was going to be involved in something like this.
Could this young woman really be a cold-blooded killer?
Detectives locate Victoria's residence, and it is her mother who answers the door.
She's informed us that, yes, her daughter's driving a car. And what did the police need with her daughter? So at that point, we asked her to have her daughter come home.
She called Victoria Say on the phone and said that police officers were there and wanted to talk with her. Victoria showed up probably 10 or 15 minutes later.
She was acting very normal. She wasn't, she wasn't asking us why we were there. She wasn't asking us what was going on. She wasn't arguing, she wasn't combative or anything. And so she got into the squad car and they brought her down to the office.
Police also take possession of the silver Mitsubishi.
We verified that the tag information given us by the witness is what was on the vehicle. So we just immediately towed it to the impound lot so that, once the initial investigation slowed down, we'd get a warrant for the vehicle. So we go into the interview room and introduce ourselves. Victoria's very calm.
She's asked, obviously, the question about the shooting. Are you responsible for this? She says no. She never denied being on the scene, but she said she was not responsible for shooting the victim.
The questioning lasts several hours.
The detectives, they dig in real hard with Victoria. They let her know. We have witnesses that place you at the scene. So Victoria bends a little bit.
Victoria explains that she was spending the day with her friend and high school classmate, Shelby Isaac.
Shelby and Victoria were very good friends and had been for a while. They did know each other during high school. Victoria would do Shelby's hair. Shelby would buy hair for herself and then have Victoria put it in for her.
Victoria said they had met up earlier in the day with Eddie, the victim, to purchase some hair weave.
The trio met in the parking lot of a local fast food restaurant to make the transaction.
She and Shelby Isaac had went over there to meet the hairman and bought $250 hair from him.
Victoria explains that Shelby didn't really inspect the hair until later.
We learned that Shelby had decided that she didn't like the quality of the hair that she had purchased from Eddie.
And there was some discussion after that Shelby wanted to get her money back. There was a phone call made to Eddie Tate, wanted to meet him in the Sycamore Lakes apartments where Shelby Isaac lives, and they proceeded to go to that location.
Victoria says she drove Shelby to the apartment complex where Shelby lived to meet up with Eddie for the second time.
As they get ready to park, Shelby sees Eddie's green car, and obviously it's the car that they had met earlier, so Shelby gets out of the car.
Their initial suspect is about to explain her version of what happened on that terrible day. After Eddie Tate Jr., his girlfriend Edwina Thomas, and their unborn baby were killed in a shooting, Memphis police questioned 18-year-old Victoria C. about the crime. Victoria says that she and her friend, 18-year-old Shelby Isaac, met up with Eddie to negotiate a refund for a hair bundle.
She was unhappy with her purchase, so she went to get her money back.
Victoria claims she drove Shelby to the apartment complex, and then Shelby got out, leaving her to park.
As Victoria's parking the car, Shelby's already out walking over to Eddie's car.
According to Victoria, she hears gunshots. She sees Shelby with the gun in her hand. She screams, "Oh my God," and then Victoria runs back to her vehicle. She falls right before she gets in, and then she drives off at a high rate of speed.
She leaves Shelby. She drives across the street to another apartment complex and starts calling Shelby. "Hey, are you okay? Where are you?" Shelby says, "I'm right up here at the front. Come and get me." So Victoria pulls up to the front of the complex, picks Shelby up, they drive off.
Victoria places the blame directly on her friend Shelby, even claiming Shelby confessed to her.
Victoria then says that Shelby told her that she shot Eddie and that he was dead, and that there was another lady in the car and she had blacked out. She said that while she was standing there, the lady came to and said, "I'm pregnant." And so Shelby said that she did not shoot her again. Victoria said that after they went to a friend's house.
Victoria tells them the friend's name is Darian Melvin. She says that a few hours later, she dropped Shelby off with another friend, Gary Dotson.
Shelby and Victoria show up where Gary's staying. Victoria leaves in the silver Mitsubishi. Shelby stays there.
And then Victoria gets a call from her mom. And her mom wants to know, why is the police at her house?
Victoria swears she was not the one who pulled the trigger. But is she just trying to protect herself?
When Victoria named Shelby Isaac as the shooter, we didn't know if she was lying. We didn't know if she was trying to blame someone else.
At that time, we weren't 100% sure. Did we have the shooter or did we have the driver?
Police arrest Victoria C. while they work to figure out the truth of what happened.
Victoria, she was charged with accessory after the fact, which is a very, very low-grade felony.
Police cannot trust anything that Victoria says, and they have to corroborate everything that she just told them. So now they have to focus on where was Shelby at, and who is Shelby Isaacs?
The answer to those and many other questions lies in the next installment of this two-part special.
Are we 100% sure we got this right before we put murder charges on people?
If you follow the evidence, it does not lead you to Shelby. She's a good student, had her eyes on college.
Coming up, a surprising new claim reveals another possible suspect.
2 other witnesses described seeing a man on the scene.
And a trial that's one for the ages.
The judge didn't want to try this case.
I just screamed, I want justice for my child.
The judge says, have you reached a verdict?
We didn't know which way it was going to go.
Be sure to find out how it all ends next time on Payback.
ดู